Alright, what is up, everybody? We are back with another edition of Everyday Hoops. Hope you guys are having a good one. Today, we have another kind of story type of video. I've done this a couple times, but today is a different one. Very excited for this one. I'm going to be talking about the 2016-2017 New York Knicks super team, which is why I have this hat on, because my hair, I have not done it. And I remembered I had this Knicks hat that I had got a very long time ago, and I was like, hey, why not wear it here in this one? I'm not a Knicks fan. I just have this hat, and it fits the theme of the video. So we talk about that Knicks team and why it was important and why that failure of a team happened here in today's video. Very excited for it. It took me a little while to script this out, make it. So I appreciate if you watched the whole thing. Thank you guys for the views on the videos and the shorts recently. I really appreciate it. If you do like the content around here, consider subscribing, turn on notifications, do all stuff like that. I'd really appreciate it. Really helps out a lot. Join the membership if you want to learn more about the membership. There's a video on my channel explaining all of it. You can go back and watch that. Link to my Twitter, all that stuff down in the description below. And don't waste any more of your time. Let's get right into it. Back in 2016, the NBA had a lot of great teams. The Warriors are coming off of the greatest regular season ever seen. The Cavaliers had the best player in the world and were NBA champions. The Spurs were continuing their amazing run of seasons, and there were many other very competent rosters around the league. And how could you forget about the New York Knicks, who are one of the best rosters and teams in the NBA? Okay, maybe not. No one considered the Knicks to be real contenders. Well, at least one person did. This is the story of the 2017 New York Knicks super team. After being one of the more consistently good teams in the 1990s, but never winning the real thing, the 2000s weren't as kind to the Knicks. In 2002, they missed the playoffs for the first time since 1987, a 14-year streak coming to an end. After missing the postseason in 2002 and 2003, they made it back in 2004 with a sub-500 record and were bounced in the first round. From then on, they went 6 years in a row missing the playoffs and overall were on a 9-year streak of under 40-win seasons. They found success in 2011, as they were back in the playoffs and made it for the next 2 years after that, with 2 first-round losses and then a second-round appearance. But they fell back to their old ways in 2014, as they won 37 games and missed the postseason again. The next season, 2014-15, would be the worst of the worst. The Knicks would finish 17-65, the second worst in the league, only above the Timberwolves, and the worst record in franchise history. In 2016, they improved to a 32-50 record, almost doubling their previous season's wins, but missed out on the postseason again. Coming into the offseason of 2016-17, the Knicks decided that it was time to try and get back to their winning ways and end their 3-year playoff drought. This offseason will be a memorable one. Not for the Knicks, but for the NBA in general. A few years earlier, the NBA would agree to a new television deal with ESPN and Turner, totaling a 9-year, $24 million deal. Because of the new deal, this means the salary cap would spike with the new money in place. When it came to the 2016-17 offseason, the cap would increase from $70 million to $94.1 million, a 32% increase. This meant that basically now every team had some sort of cap space, so even contending teams had a lot more wiggle room than normal to make moves. This will also mean that the salary floor, which is the least amount of money that a team has to have in its cap, would increase as well, as it's usually 90%. This meant that teams would have to really spend a lot of money to hit the floor, leading to teams having to give a lot more money than usual to players that probably didn't deserve as much, especially in a kind of weaker free agency class. This was very important and made this offseason memorable in maybe not all great ways. The Knicks were, once again, coming off of a 32-50 year where they missed the postseason. The front office thought it was time to get this Knicks team back to winning. The team already had Carmelo Anthony, who had just finished his 5th full season in New York. In his 5 years so far in the Big Apple, he averaged 25 points per game with 7 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal while making the All-Star team every year, making All-NBA twice, and winning a scoring title in 2013. In 2016, he averaged 21.8 points per game, his lowest since 2005, his second season in the NBA with Denver. He also averaged 7 rebounds and a career-high 4 assists per game on 43, 34, 83 shooting splits. At 31 years old, Melo still had a lot of game left and was going into his 3rd year of a 5-year, $124 million extension. They also struck gold in Kristaps Porzingis. Porzingis was drafted 4th overall the year before in 2015, which was a shocker for many people at the time. But Porzingis would shock everyone, having an amazing rookie season where he averaged 14 points per game with 7 rebounds and assists and almost 2 blocks on 42, 33, 83 shooting as he finished 2nd in Rookie of the Year voting and made All-Rookie First Team. The 20-year-old brought a lot of hope to New York, as Knicks fans were gearing up for him to be potentially one of the stars of the future. Melo and KP were really the only thing New York had at the time, as the rest of the roster was filled with veterans and bench players, but that would change very soon. The first move that Phil Jackson, the Knicks president, made was hiring their new head coach. After Mike Woodson was at the helm for 2.5 seasons, all years which he made the postseason, he was fired. His replacement would be Derek Fisher, 18-year NBA veteran and 5-time NBA champion with the Lakers. Fisher would coach the worst team in franchise history, the 17-win team in 2014, and then started 23-51 in 2015 before being fired and replaced by Kurt Rambis, 13-year NBA veteran and 4-time champion with the Lakers. Rambis would go 9-19 for the rest of the season, and a new coach would be up for it in 2017. On June 2nd, 2016, the Knicks would hire Jeff Hornacek to be their next head coach. Hornacek played in the NBA for 14 seasons with the Phoenix Suns, Philadelphia 76ers, and most notably the Utah Jazz. Hornacek would start his coaching career in 2007, where he became a shooting coach with the Utah Jazz. He eventually worked his way up to becoming an assistant in 2011. In 2013, he was hired by the Phoenix Suns to become their next head coach. Hornacek would go 48-34 in his first year in Phoenix, their best record in 4 years at the time, then go 39-43 the next year. In 2016, he started the season 14-35 and was then fired and replaced by Earl Watson. Hornacek had some good moments for Phoenix, and New York brought him in to try and bring that same magic to the Knicks. Their next move would be a big one. On June 22nd, 2016, the Knicks traded Jose Calderon, Jaren Grant, and Robin Lopez to the Chicago Bulls in exchange for Derrick Rose, Justin Holiday, and a 2017 second-round pick. Derrick Rose was at a kind of low point in his career in 2016. After having an amazing high school career, then having a magical run at Memphis in college where they went all the way to the national championship game, he was the number 1 overall pick for his hometown Chicago Bulls in the 2008 draft. He went on to win Rookie of the Year, then make his first All-Star appearance in his second year, and then won the MVP award in his third season in 2011 at 21 years old, the youngest ever to hold that trophy. He was on top of the world at this point. After having a solid 2012 season, disaster struck, as Rose went down with an ACL injury that unfortunately changed everything. Rose would miss the rest of the playoffs that year and the entirety of the 2012-13 season. He returned to start the 2013-14 season, but only played 10 games before he tore his meniscus, which caused him to miss the rest of that season. Rose would return in 14-15 and play 51 games, helping his Bulls team to 50 wins and the third seed in the East. They would beat the Bucks in 6 and play the second seed Cavaliers in the second round, where Rose had a huge moment of hitting a game winner, but they would eventually lose in 6. In 2015-16, Rose would play in 66 games, the most he's played since his MVP seasons 5 years prior, but it would be his worst statistical season of his career, averaging career low in points while also keeping a drop in assists and efficiency that he suffered since his injuries. And to top that off, Chicago would miss the postseason despite having a winning record. At this point, Derrick Rose was still a good player, but was noticeably not near the same player he was when he was winning MVP at 21 years old. Injuries had taken so much from him as he was just 27 years old and already looked like he was aging. The Bulls had to make the tough decision, as Jimmy Butler was an all-star and was taking control of the team, and now with them being stuck in neutral and with Rose on the last year of his contract, they decided to shake things up. Rose was coming into a situation in New York where he had a fresh start, was still a fan favorite, which can help, especially in New York, and had a chip on his shoulder, with being counted out and on the last year of his deal. At the time, the move felt like it could change things in New York, and he would be the main character in this story. Why? You'll see soon. The Knicks did not have a pick in the 2016 NBA draft, and we go right to free agency. Remember earlier when I talked about how the salary cap shot up 32% and now everyone had cap space and has to spend money? It comes into play now. The 2016 free agency class was not a great one. The big names were Durant, LeBron, and Wade. James signed a 3-year, $100 million deal to stay in Cleveland, where he just won a championship. Dwayne Wade left his legacy in Miami to go home and play for the Bulls. And Kevin Durant made maybe the most notable signing in NBA history, joining up with the Golden State Warriors, the team that just won 73 games and who beat Durant's Thunder in the conference finals, but had lost to Cleveland. After that, the names were not as powerful. And with this money that teams had to spend, let's just say it was an amazing time to be on the open market. The Knicks had a lot of money to spend, as Carmelo was really the only guy they were paying good money to, so you had to go and use his cap to build this team back up to a playoff contender. Their biggest move in this free agency was picking up Joakim Noah, giving him a 4-year, $72 million contract. Noah was a teammate of the newly acquired Derrick Rose in Chicago for many years, and he left his mark over there as well. Noah won a Defensive Player of the Year award trophy in 2014, while also making All-NBA First Team, All-Defensive First Team, and even finishing top 5 in MVP voting that season. Noah averaged 9 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, and a block in his time in Chicago, while making that All-NBA appearance, winning that DPOY award, and making 3 All-Defensive Team appearances while being a fan favorite for his energy and hustle. The year prior, 2015-16, Noah suffered multiple surgery injuries which forced him to play in only 29 games. He was 30 years old at the time and lost out in his starting spot, as it looked like the Bulls teams of the early 2010s were being broken up, especially with the Rose trade. This led the Knicks to come in and give Noah $18 million a year, which at the time was very interesting, and knowing what we know now, yikes. They were not done yet though. Their next signing would be giving Courtney Lee a 4-year, $50 million contract. Lee was a former first-round pick out of Western Kentucky back in 2008. Lee established who he was early, as a good contributing wing role player that could shoot and defend. As a rookie, he was a regular rotational player and even became a starter for an Atlanta Magic team that made it all the way to the finals before losing to the Lakers. He was then packaged in a trade to New Jersey for Vince Carter, where he had the best statistical season of his career to date. He was then shipped off again the next offseason on a 4-team deal that ended up with him in Houston. He played 2 years there, finally, and was then dealt to the Boston Celtics. Lee spent the full 2012-13 season there, then played 30 games of 2013-14 before being traded midseason to the Memphis Grizzlies in a 3-team deal. Lee spent a lot of time in Memphis, as he played 49 games after being dealt there in 13-14, then the entire 14-15 season, and played 51 games for the Grizzlies in 2015-16 before being traded at the trade deadline in a 3-team deal to the Hornets. Lee would play 28 games for the Hornets and the playoffs with them and was now a free agent. Lee was a solid veteran wing with a lot of experience that any playoff team could use. The Knicks, wanting to be that type of team, threw Lee a nice $50 million contract to hope to get some quality players around Melo, KP, and Rose. Lee obviously agreed, as it was the nice money and the first time in his career he could choose where he landed. This was not the end of the Knicks signing. Even though they didn't have a pick, the Knicks would still bring in a rookie, as they gave a rookie deal to Willy Hernangomez. Hernangomez was a 7-foot big man from Spain, where he played for many years. He played for Real Madrid for 5 years, where he was considered one of the top prospects over there. He was selected with the 35th pick in 2015 by the 76ers, but was then flipped to the Knicks, who held his rights. 1 year after being picked, he decided it was time to come over and signed his rookie deal with New York, giving the Knicks some more youth and more depth at the center position in case Noah's shoulder injury would come back. The next move for New York was bringing in Brandon Jennings. Jennings was the 10th pick in the 2009 draft out of Oak Hill Academy after being ranked the number 1 player in the '08 class. Jennings popped off right away, having an amazing rookie year for Milwaukee, including a 55-point game very early on. He would play 3 more seasons with the Bucks, averaging 18 points per game with 6 assists and a steal, and led them to a playoff appearance in 2013. After that season, he was signed and traded to the Detroit Pistons. Jennings averaged 15.5 points and over 7.5 assists in his first year there, but the team went 29-53 and missed the playoffs. The next year, he played 41 games before suffering a ruptured Achilles that forced him to miss the season. He returned to play 23 games the next year, but was then traded to the Magic, where he played 25 games, and now his contract was up. 2015-16 was the worst year of Brandon Jennings' career at this point, averaging just under 7 points per game and was still coming off an Achilles injury. His market was nothing special, and so New York decided to give him a chance, giving him a 1-year, $5 million deal to back up Derrick Rose. Why not get a guy that at one point was a consistent 15 to 20 points every night for cheap? This was a whole new roster for New York, as only 5 players from last year's team were back, in Melo, KP, Carlo Quinn, Lance Thomas, and Sasha Vujacic. Rose, Lee, Noah, Jennings, Hernangomez, even Justin Holiday, who came with Derrick Rose from Chicago, Mindaugas Kuzminskis, someone they signed from Lithuania, Ron Baker, an undrafted free agent, led by Jeff Hornacek. This was the team that many thought could bring playoff basketball back to New York. Before the 2016-17 season started, all of the talk was about Kevin Durant joining the Golden State Warriors. Everyone in the world was shocked and, unless you're a Warrior fan, was upset by this decision. This was such a decision that the commissioner, Adam Silver, talked about the signing and used it to fuel a conversation that changed the CBA, which still had 5 years before being up at the time. The Durant signing fueled so much talk about changes to signings, free agency, and all of that, but that's for an entirely different video. Why is this conversation important? Well, because this actually made this video happen. I'll explain why. Give me a few minutes. We go back to Derrick Rose. Remember earlier when I said he would be the main character in this story? Here's where it comes into place. Rose was being interviewed by NBA.com in July, a little bit after free agency and the Silver statement. Obviously, now that he's in New York and they made a lot of moves in free agency, he was asked about the team's expectations for the upcoming season. And he says, quote, "They're high. I mean, with these teams right now, they're saying us and Golden State are the super teams, and they're trying not to build that many super teams. And Adam Silver came out with that statement and this and that. And the expectations, I think, of us, we just want to win. Talking to Melo and all the guys who've been around, you got Brandon Jennings, who just signed for 1 year. He's got to show why he's there. I got to show why I'm there. Joe Kim has to show why he's there. Everybody's trying to prove themselves." End quote. I'm sorry. Huh? You and Golden State are the super teams? Y'all are a super team. This team won 32 games this season and brought in players that didn't average more than 16 points the year prior. Where's the word super coming from? I do agree with the point that a lot of people have things to prove. Derrick Rose wants to show people that the old D Rose is still there and that he's on the last year of his deal. Joe Kino has to show that he's worth the money and he's still good with being older now and coming off of injuries. Brandon Jennings is on a 1-year deal and has to prove he still belongs. That is true. But super team? You guys gotta make the playoffs first. Of course, everyone sees this statement and has the same reaction I just had, but probably a lot worse. And it honestly gets a lot of talk throughout the rest of the summer. But to stop these talks, all they have to do is one thing: go out and ball. Can they do that? Let's see. Their first game of the season was ring night for the Cleveland Cavaliers, a chance to show the whole NBA world what they were made of. They lost by 29 points. Cleveland outscored New York 34-19 in the third to run away with the game as the Cavs' big three combined for 71 points. Melo led the Knicks with 19 points, while Rose had 17 in his Knicks debut, and Porzingis scored 16. Noah and Courtney Lee both started and went scoreless each in 19 minutes, and no one off the bench scored double figures. It was bad, but It's the first game of the season. There's still so much time to get better. Their next game will be their first win, beating the Grizzlies 111 to 104. They will go 4-6 over their next 10 games, with 4 of those 6 losses being by double figures, but so was 3 of their 4 wins. With Phil Jackson running the team, the famous triangle offense was being put into place. But very early on, there was a lot of discussion about it, especially being in the modern NBA. After their 5-point loss to the Utah Jazz in the 6th game of the season, with their record being 2-4, Carmelo was asked and he said, quote, "I'm tired of hearing about the triangle, man," end quote. The next day, a report from ESPN came out saying that Jackson wasn't pleased by how little the triangle was being run, and some sources said that some of the Knicks players have their displeasures about the offense because they didn't support their personnel. Already reports and disagreements got the game plan being rumored. We're in November, but we still go on. Their perhaps biggest drama of the season came around this time as well, as it wasn't even because of their play or even from a player. Phil Jackson was being interviewed by Jackie McMullen of ESPN. It was an interview about a variety of topics, and one thing that was brought up was his coaching career. McMullen asked the question of what separates Pat Riley from himself and Greg Popovich because they were 3 of the most decorated head coaches. Jackson brought up that Riley always had a sense of what he wanted and the communication breaking down between Dwayne Wade and Riley as Wade had just left for Chicago. McMullen asked, quote, "It all started when LeBron left, right? Could you have ever imagined Irvin Johnson leaving Riley or Michael Jordan leaving you," end quote. Jackson's answer was, quote, "It had to hurt when they lost LeBron. That was definitely a slap in the face. But there are a lot of things that came out of that. When LeBron was playing with the Heat, they went to Cleveland and he wanted to spend the night. They don't do overnights. Teams just don't. So now Spoelstra has to text Riley and say, what do I do in this situation? And Pat, who has Iron Fist rules, answers, you are on the plane, you're with this team. You can't hold up the whole team because you and your mom and your posse want to spend an extra night in Cleveland," end quote. This answer sparked a lot, particularly using his word posse. This rubbed many people the wrong way, as it should have. Not a great thing to say, Phil. Could have gone about it in so many different ways, yet that's what you choose. LeBron and Carmelo Anthony both had comments about the quote, with Melo saying he doesn't understand why Phil's even talking about LeBron, and that you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand the connotation behind the word posse. It was pretty bad, and again, we are still in November. After their 5-7 start, New York starts to find their rhythm. They would win 7 of their next 9 games to improve their record to 12-9. This stretch would include a 10-point win against Atlanta, where Carmelo had 31, a 4-point win against Portland, thanks to a Derrick Rose clutch shot in a game where Porzingis had 31, an overtime win against the Hornets, where Melo capped off a 35, 13, and 5 night with the game winner. Then he hit another game winner a few nights later to beat Minnesota, and will beat them by 4 again in the next game, as Rose and Melo combined for 53, beat the Kings by 8, and beat Miami with Melo dropping 35 again. The team was starting to come together. They would then lose their next game to the Cavaliers by 32 points, getting absolutely demolished. On this day, this is not the only bad thing that happens for the Knicks. Phil Jackson did an interview with CBS Sports on We Need to Talk. The triangle offense and Carmelo Anthony was brought up as now he's the next star to use it behind Jordan and Kobe. Jackson says, quote, "Carmelo a lot of times wants to hold the ball longer than we have a rule. If you hold the past 2 seconds, you benefit the defense. So he has a little bit of a tendency to hold the ball for 3, 4, 5 seconds and everybody comes to a stop. That is one of the things we work with. But he has adjusted to it, he knows what he can do, and he's willing to see its success," end quote. So coming out and criticizing your star player for literally no reason, that's what we're doing. This is just a random and bizarre thing to even bring up, especially when he says he's adjusted to it. You could have just said that part of it. Also, real quick, this article from CBS Sports is helping me a lot with this part of the video, as it's an article that has a lot of quotes from different situations that happened throughout the season. So I'll link it in the description if you want to see that and all that for yourself, or more in-depth things that won't make it into the video. The Knicks come back and win their next 2 games, then lose 3 in a row, including a 13-point loss to the Warriors, the rival Superteam, if you will. Then they won their next 2 games after that against the Pacers and Magic to bring their record to 16-13, 5th in the East. Then the ship starts to sink. New York will go on a 6-game losing streak, losing to the Celtics by 5 on Christmas Day, losing to the Hawks by 4 in OT, the Pelicans by 12, the Rockets by 7 as James Harden had a 53 points, 16 rebounds, 17 assist game. Yeah, prime James Harden is ridiculous. The Magic by 12 as 3 players scored 20 plus for Orlando, which was Aaron Gordon, Serge Ibaka, and Jody Meeks, and the Bucks by 1 thanks to a Giannis game winner. This dropped the record to 16-19, down to 10th in the East. You could feel like this losing streak is what started the real downfall, as Phil Jackson comments already held this team back, but this is where the real takedown started. After the loss of the Magic, Coach Hornacek came out after the game and said, quote, "I don't think our guys aren't trying. Maybe it's just we're not capable of it. I don't know," end quote. Then after the Bucks lost, Carmelo said, quote, "It is what it is. Regardless of what happens, when we win, it's us. When we lose, it's me," end quote. Not great things to say on a team with high expectations, apparently. They won their next game against Milwaukee as Melo and Porzingis combined for 50, but then lost to the Pacers by 14. Their next game against the Pelicans was very confusing. Not in the game, but before. Derrick Rose was not seen before the game, and no one knew where he was. He went missing. He wasn't injured or anything, and no one on the team knew where he was. Even after the game, which they lost, teammates and coaches still didn't really know what was going on. The next day, Rose returned to the team and explained that he went back home to Chicago for an emergency, but he didn't tell any of the team officials until midway through the game, where he texted some of the managers. A lot of speculation went on about it, if it was a boycott because of some of the recent benchings by Hornacek or other reasons, and we actually learned about it later on. A few years ago, Rose released a book called I'll Show You, where he explains that he needed a break and needed to go home. He went home and had a discussion with his family and even decided at one point that he was going to quit because he had a lot on his plate. I love Derrick Rose, love how open and honest he is a lot, and I wish nothing but the best for him, especially because at the time I'm making this video, he just announced his retirement, and I made a video reacting to his best moments, so go check it out, and I wish him the best in his next chapter. Back to the Knicks. They lose 3 of their next 4 games. Then, more Phil Jackson media things. Awesome. The article was written by Charlie Rosen, a friend of Jackson and his basically ghostwriter. He released an article bashing Carmelo Anthony, saying that he's outlived his time in New York and saying that he would waive his no trade clause for the Cavs and Clippers, or maybe even more teams apparently because he complains a lot about him being blamed for them losing. Melo responds to this by saying, quote, "If that's the case, that's what's coming from that side, I guess it's a conversation we should have. If they feel like my time in New York is over, I guess that's a conversation we should have," end quote. Yeah, let's tank the ship even more by throwing our star player under the bus. The next day, apparently Anthony and Jackson had a meeting, and Melo said that he wants to stay in New York. A few days later, Melo says, quote, "I think it will be more on the front office. I have the power, but still I would talk to them. We'd be in communication if they feel like they want to go in a different direction, they want to start rebuilding for the future. If they tell me they want to scrap this whole thing, yeah, I have to consider it," end quote. And he said this about the trade rumors and about him apparently waiving his no trade clause for other teams. This helped spark Carmelo trade rumors big time. With the situation happening and the Knicks being bad, it looked like a trade could be more realistic. The Knicks would go 4-5 of their next 9 to drop to a 21-29 record, slipping more and more under 500 each passing day. Then they would go on a 4-game losing streak to tank their record even more. The streak included a 7-point loss to Cleveland, a 14-point loss to the Lakers, by 4 to the Clippers behind Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan combining for 60, by 8 to Denver as Jokic had 40, also losing Joakim Noah to a knee injury, and Charles Oakley leaving a game in handcuffs, being arrested and eventually banned from MSG. That situation was a lot, and this kind of just sums up the entire season right here. They beat the Spurs by 4 and lost to the Thunder by 11 to enter the All-Star break with a 23-34 record, 12th in the East. At All-Star, Carmelo was announced as a replacement in the All-Star game due to a Kevin Love injury, and Kristaps Porzingis won the Skills Challenge, probably the highlight of the season. After All-Star comes the NBA trade deadline, and the move for the Knicks was nothing. They did nothing. Melo was asked if he understood the vision of the management after the deadline, and he said, quote, "No, not now. No, to be honest with you," end quote. Same, Melo. Same. Their first game back from All-Star, they lost to the Cavs by 15. They beat the Sixers the next game, then lost to the Raptors. The day of the Raptor game, the Knicks released Brandon Jennings. This was actually a self-decision, as Jennings had requested a trade, but that didn't happen, so he wanted out. Jennings finished his Knicks career with 58 games, averaging 8 points and almost 5 assists. He would end up signing with the Wizards and made the playoffs while being a rotational player, so good for him. The Knicks will go 3-5 over their next 8 to bring their record down to 27-41. Then, another 5-game losing streak, losing to a 13-win Nets team by 11, the Clippers by 9, the Jazz by 7 as Rudy Gobert had a 35-point, 15-rebound game, the Blazers by 15, and the Spurs by 8. On the day of the Spurs game, it was announced that Joakim Noah would be suspended for 20 games for violating the NBA's anti-drug program. He wasn't playing anyway, but let's just keep making the season worse, I guess. They broke the streak by beating Detroit, then lost to the Heat by 17. With that loss, they were officially eliminated from the playoffs. They closed out the season 3-4 to finish with a 31-51 record, worse than the year before, and 12th in the Eastern Conference. Carmelo averaged 22 points per game with almost 6 rebounds and almost 3 assists. Porzingis jumped in year 2 to average 18 points with 7 rebounds and 2 blocks. Rose averaged 18 points, and Courtney Lee averaged almost 11. This team with high expectations and apparently a super team was worse than the year before. Because, of course, but the season from hell is over. Almost. Exit interviews got very wild. Anthony's interview said, quote, "I wanted to win. They know that when I signed my contract a couple years ago, that's still my mindset. If that's not the direction we want to go in, it's communication. Just communicate. Communicate with me directly. If that's the direction you want to go in, I'll respect that. If it's something you want to continue to build on, I'll respect that too. Just communicate with me and be upfront with me. I'm open. I've seen the writing on the wall a long time ago," end quote. This was kind of signaling at Melo, knowing that a decision has to be made, especially after the season that just happened. Then Phil Jackson had his interview, and man, what a perfect way to end this arc of a season for himself. He says, quote, "We have not been able to win with him on the court at the time. And I think the direction with our team is that he's a player that will be better off somewhere else and using talent somewhere where he can win or chase that championship. Right now, we need players that are really active, can play every single play defensively and offensively. That's really important for us," end quote. Wow. So he basically ends the season with saying, "Yeah, Melo's out of here." What? Why say this at your exit interview at this time with everything that has happened this season? The NBPA executive director, Michelle Roberts, came out with a statement the next day about Phil's comments, basically saying that he shouldn't have publicly come out and said that he doesn't want him on the team anymore. Then Porzingis skips his exit meeting with Phil Jackson. He went to spend his time with the Latvia national team, and that was a thing. But now, officially, the season is over. This, quote, super team that was formed went about as bad as you can get, on and off the court. From the hype up, to them not being able to make it work, to comments all the time about how they're not good, to trade rumors, to players going missing, to the manager openly criticizing his players and ended up being worse than the year before on a team that didn't have anybody. This was one of the most horrible seasons we have seen in a while. In the aftermath, Phil Jackson was fired as the team president. The Knicks ended up trading Carmelo Anthony to the OKC Thunder. Derrick Rose went into free agency and signed with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Joakim Noah was suspended the first 10 games of the next season, then came back and played just 7 games with the team. Kristaps Porzingis became the star of the team, having an all-star season, but then tearing his ACL, and we know how that story ends. Courtney Lee, he stayed around for a few years. And with the Knicks being so bad, they did have their own pick, which ended up being 8th overall, and they selected Frank Ntilikina. A perfect way to end this video of the worst super team ever. And yeah, there it is. That's the 2016-2017 Knicks failed super team. The full story. Once again, it took me a while to make this video, so I appreciate you watching the whole thing if you made it this far, and showing us some more support. I want to do maybe more videos like this eventually too in the future. So leave down in the comment section if you want to see more on what teams I should do and all that stuff like that. I'd really appreciate it. And yeah, once again, if you enjoyed the content around here, consider subscribing, like, turn on notifications, do all stuff like that. I'd really appreciate it. It really helps out a lot. And yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow.